All right, Zoom's been a little funky. Can I get a head nod if you can see this presentation right now? Splendid. Okay. All right, so let's get going. So welcome to House Hacking Basics. A couple of rules for you all. Please do interrupt and ask questions. I usually have like 10 to 20 people in these classes, so small enough for you to interrupt if something is important. Otherwise, there's a couple of natural breaks throughout the class that I'll naturally stop. So you can save your questions then too if you're a little more shy. Please keep your microphone muted just so I can hear while I'm talking. Please use the information. And then the most important rule is that if you are currently paying rent, please stop as soon as humanly possible. So a little bit of a quick agenda. I'm going to tell you a bit about myself. We're going to go over a couple of definitions and principles just to make sure that we're all working from the same kind of playing field. Then we'll jump into house hacking and what it is. And then we'll finish up with some success stories, which is usually people's favorite part because I'm going to show you the financials of my investments, as well as some of the clients that I've helped and what this house hacking strategy can look like. And then at the very, very, very end, I'm going to give you a bunch of information. So my email, cell phone, Instagram account, website, etc., so that you can follow along because I put out a ton of content on this stuff. So if you end up being hungry for more, you can stay in touch. Okay, so who the heck am I? My name is Chelsea Steen. I'm 31 years old. I'm a realtor in Denver, Colorado. However, I am in a tank top right now. I am not in Colorado. I am in Nicaragua. My partner and I are on some extended travel thanks to our rentals, actually. So after 6 years, it's basically funding us being abroad for a while, which is very exciting. I'm a current house hacker. I myself have 5 units. My partner has 1 unit, so we have 6 together. I built and sold a company. So in the past, I was in the construction world, built up a good business there and sold it off, which is what I used for the down payment on my second property. Last but not least, a couple things. If this is your first time ever coming, I know some of you it's not. You've come to other stuff I've had. But if you don't know me, a couple things I want you to know that you can always expect. Number one, I am primarily focused on education. Not really that interested in getting sales. Obviously, that's how I pay my bills. But honestly, I got into real estate to try to make a difference because I don't think that our education system does a good job of teaching people how to build wealth. If anything, I feel like the US really tries to keep people in debt. So everything that I am doing is just to try to teach people as much as humanly possible to move them forward. I'm really interested in long-term relationships. I have a bunch of people that have come to these classes and they still hit me up by text every once in a while with questions, even though they don't even live in Colorado. That's totally fine. I'd love to see your face again. And then last but not least, I am extremely focused on helping other people achieve wealth, and I believe real estate's the best way to do so. So other classes really quick, we're not gonna spend any time tonight talking about the actual process of buying a house. I teach a class for that, which is a home buying 101 class. My next class for that, if you've never purchased before, is on February 21st. I teach it on a bi-monthly basis, so I just alternate these. So house hacking, home buying, house hacking, home buying. If you want the information for that one, because you want to know a little bit more about just the standard buying process, just reach out and I'll send you the link. But that one is where we'll take a deep dive into the buying process. So before we can jump into house hacking, there's a couple of principles that I need to make sure that we all fully understand. And this is also something that I talk about in my home buying 101 class as a part of it. So any class you come to from me, you're going to hear this kind of next set of slides because I think it's actually the most important thing that I can offer you. So I teach it all the time. I don't care what class it is. So what are the advantages of owning versus renting? There's a couple. The first is that you build equity, which we'll talk about. The second is that there are some distinct tax advantages. The third is that you're buying an appreciating asset, meaning you're buying something that goes up in value over time. And last but not least, real estate gives you more financial leverage than any other financial vehicle can. So a little bit about equity really quick. What the heck is equity? Equity is essentially the difference between what something is worth and what you owe on it. So if you own a $500,000 home and you have a $300,000 loan, if you sold that property, in theory, you have roughly $200,000 in equity. right? Money that is yours. So my kind of rhetorical question to you all is, how much equity do you build when you're paying rent? And you don't even have to unmute. We all know the answer, and it's not fun, right? It's zero. So sometimes I get a wise ass that comes in and says, well, you got to pay for maintenance and you got to pay for interest and you got to pay this, that, and whatever. Yeah, I get it. And when you own, you're building equity. So even outside of all of those other expenses, worst case scenario, you're still going to get some money back. And I'm going to take that all day over no money back. So if there's any wise asses here, that's my kind of point back to you. Okay, the next one is tax advantages. I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a bit. And then the third is appreciating assets. So something that goes up in value over time is what we consider to be an appreciating asset. And a good kind of analogy for you to think about is like an antique. So the older it gets, the more it's worth, right? The worst thing that Americans spend money on are depreciating assets. And there's one in particular, which is cars, right? As soon as you drive that thing off the lot, it's only ever going down in value, 100% of the time. Again, a wise ass will always say, well, what about a classic car? You're right, but that's an antique, falls into that category. So yes, it may be worth more as it gets older, but our traditional cars that we're driving around are actually going down in value over time. So let's talk about financial leverage, and please do listen up. Literally the next two slides are the most important of the whole presentation. Feel free to take screenshots, do whatever you want. I'm going to go slow and try to explain this. So before I can explain financial leverage in real estate to you, I need to make sure that you fully understand compound interest and how it works. So if you take money and put it into an account, and you're going to make interest on that amount every year, so let's say you're going to get a fixed 4%. That's lovely. You're going to gain 4%, right? Accounts that allow you to leave that interest payment in the account and then gain interest on that interest the following year is called a compound interest account. So let me kind of show you what it might look like. For example, you take $20,000, you put it into an IRA, a 401k, some sort of retirement account. And let's say you were guaranteed a fixed 4% every single year, just to keep things easy to understand. So in that first year, your interest payment would be $800 because that's 4% of 20K. So you got that lovely $800 interest payment, lovely. You're just going to park it and leave it in the account. So your balance goes up to $20,800. And to be clear, this isn't you actually out of pocket putting any more money in that account. You're just leaving the interest payments in there. So now in year two, you're going to make 4% off of your new balance, which is $20,800. So your payment is now $832. So your interest payment went up because it's being calculated off of a higher amount. So you again just park those funds. Now your balance goes up to $21,632. Year three, same thing. Your payment goes up to $866. You park it, you leave it, the account continues to grow, and therefore so do your interest payments. So after 30 years, that $20,000 that you invested turned into $64,867, which is triple the amount of money that you invested, which is pretty good. This is why people put money into retirement accounts. But it's not great. So let me show you the difference between how 401ks, et cetera, and real estate work, and also just every other financial vehicle out there. So typically when you go invest money into an account, you can only make money off of what it is that you're investing. Meaning if you take that 20K and give it to your financial advisor, they can only make you money off of that 20,000, right? But here's the funny thing with real estate. If you take that same $20,000 and you put it down on a $300,000 home, it isn't your down payment that's gaining the 4%. It's the entire value of the asset. It's the $300,000 home that is going up 4% each year. So why did I use 4%? Well, the national rate of appreciation in real estate across the US over the last 30 years is roughly at about 4.5% to 5% each year. So this 4% example that I've put here, you might argue is actually even conservative, and that's fine. You take that same 20K, you put it down on a $300,000 home. Let's say that $300,000 home goes up on average annually 4%. At the end of 30 years, that house is now worth $973,000. Same 20K invested, but a little bit different of an output. So that is the huge thing for you to understand about real estate. This is why 96% of millionaires have achieved that status because of real estate. They understand this principle that if you've got 50 grand, you can go put 50 grand in the stock market and maybe you'll gain 10% on that 50. Or you could go take 50 grand and put it down on a $500,000 home, and that $500,000 home could gain 10%. So it's leveraging your money so much freaking further than anything else can because it's off of the value of the asset. Before I go any further, does anyone have questions about this? Because it's just, again, the most important part of the class.
I don't have a question particularly about this, but on a previous slide, I think you said you meet bi-monthly, and month of February is for home buying. Is that for buying a home with the mindset of buying a multi-unit for house hacking, or is that just a general home buying 101?
Yeah, good question. So that's just a general home buying 101, although it's the same steps when you buy a multi-unit, there's just a little bit extra involved. So if you've already purchased before, it might not be as helpful. If you've never purchased before, I would go and then just have your questions ready for me about multi-unit, and I'll answer all of those because multi-unit is one of my favorite things to talk about.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Anybody else? I just want to know that this makes sense. It's just so important. All right, seeing none, we're going to keep rocking. All right, so now that we know that owning is better than renting, let's talk about investing. This is the fun part. So there are so many freaking real estate investment strategies out there. So many. There's house hacking, live and flip, fix and flip, long-term rental, short-term rentals, the BRRRR method, wholesaling, short sales, foreclosures, yada, 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 yada. It's so much information. And one of the things that's really hard in our society at this point is there's so much information out there that what I see happens is people get paralysis by analysis. They go try to read as much as humanly possible and understand all of their different options, and they end up overcomplicating things and never just doing the damn thing. So how do we know what investment strategy might be right for you? Well, I'll give you a couple of pointers, but then you've got to figure that out yourself. And then I'll talk about the benefits of house hacking. But if you don't own right now, house hacking is probably the way to go. Or if you've got one rental and you're looking to scale really quickly, house hacking will probably be the way to go. So I'll explain that. But in order to figure out what investment strategy is best for you, you need to figure out what your why is. So the way that I solve problems is I figure out what is it that I'm trying to achieve like way far in the future, and then I reverse engineer that into steps. So if your goal right now is, well, I just want to go buy one property, that's not enough. There's got to be an emotional tie. Why do you want that property? If you want 4 properties, why? What is the purpose? What are you trying to do with all of this? Because if you can get your end goal figured out, it'll help you make better decisions along the way to get you there faster. So a couple of examples of what your why might be. Maybe you want income or money later. You've got a great job, you love it, you're making ends meet, you're happy, and you just want to make sure that you're set up for retirement because maybe you see that your parents weren't set up for retirement and you don't want to be in that same spot, right? Or you've got kids and you don't want them to have to take you on. So maybe it's that you want income or you want money down the road. Maybe it's that you want income now. You've got some amount of funds that you want to invest. You feel shaky about other investment strategies, and you're just trying to get a return right now because you know you need to invest it and stop collecting that 0.01% from your savings account that's doing nothing. Or maybe the other part of this is because you're going to invest it, having like the $500 a month extra would actually make a really big difference for you right now with where you're at. The third, just as another example, is what mine was, which was to replace my current income as fast as humanly possible so that I can retire immediately and spend the rest of my life just doing things that I like, which is primarily educating people. So figure out what your why is. Sit down, have like a little goal setting session, have tea, candles, whatever it is that you need to get into the mood of figuring out what it is that you actually want. I remember I did this. I was 21 years old. I went to a coffee shop with a book. I sat down and I wrote for like 4 or 5 hours just doing math equations because that's what makes me feel better is math. And what I figured out was, okay, in order to replace my current income level or where I wanted to be, this is how many properties I needed to buy at different purchase points. This is how much would be required in down payments. How was I going to come up with those down payments? What was I going to be able to rent those houses out for? And I basically just did this whole freaking math equation to figure out that if I just bought 5 places by the time I turned 30 and then spent the next 5 to 7 years aggressively paying them off, I would never have to work again. Okay, so figure out your why. So what is house hacking? House hacking is actually a pretty simple principle. So you buy a house, right? You live in that house. You're buying it as a primary residence, and then you're renting out some portion of that house, and that covers some or all of your mortgage. And then fundamentally, a year later, you can rinse and repeat and do it again, as long as you have enough of the down payment saved. So it's a very, very easy concept, but we'll go through it a little bit more. And so really what you're doing with house hacking is you're using other people's money to build wealth for cheap, and you're using as little of your money as possible. So let me explain some of the differences. So let's talk about the difference between house hacking versus just owning a property. Why is it different? Because maybe some of you already own right now and you're thinking, I kind of want a house hack, but I don't know how that works. So the advantages of house hacking versus just owning are pretty simple. When you own a home and you live in it and you're not renting out any portion of it, it's just your primary residence. That's it. But as soon as you start renting out a bedroom or 2, you are now turning it into a business. You have income and you have expenses. And that income and those expenses can be used to your benefit to get you ahead. So as an example, when you house hack out your primary, you get some additional tax deductions, such as depreciation and operating expenses. So why would that be to your advantage rather than just living there by yourself and enjoying your privacy? So if you buy a house and you move into it and you decide you want to remodel that kitchen and it costs you 20 grand, guess what? You just improved your house. You'll make money on the back end when you go to sell. All of that is well and good, but you don't get any tax benefits for that. However, if you were to buy that property, rent out a bedroom, then remodel that same kitchen, interestingly enough, let's say you're renting out 50% of the property, you might be able to deduct 50% of that improvement because it was an improvement to your business. So what I like to do is buy properties that need a lot of work, do a ton of work, and rent out as many bedrooms as humanly possible so I can write off all of those improvements. Because now I get to take the tax deduction for that I wouldn't have otherwise gotten to take. And whenever I go to sell that thing, I've also just drastically increased the value. So I'm getting like 2 huge benefits at once. Obviously, the second benefit is that half to all of your mortgage is being paid for by somebody else. That's a pretty good gig, right? And because of that, that gives you extra funds, which allow you to have more financial leverage. So if you all of a sudden were only on the hook for half of your mortgage and you were able to stock aside that extra, 1 or 2K that you were renting bedrooms for, you can just set that aside and use that as your down payment money so that you can go buy your next place. That's what a lot of house hackers do. So it starts to turn into this fun little cycle. And as a result, you get to build wealth faster. So yay, it just expedites the process. A little bit of discomfort having roommates to drastically expedite the process. So what's the difference between house hacking versus just buying an investment property? I have so many freaking millennials that come to me and say, I don't own a house right now, but I'm gonna buy a property in Texas and I'm gonna Airbnb it. And it makes no freaking sense whatsoever, but they don't understand what I'm about to explain. So just as a pro tip for all of you, buy your primary first, for the love of goodness, please. So the difference between house hacking and just buying a flat out investment property is really two huge things. One is the down payment size that's required, and the second is the interest rate that you get hit with. So when you're house hacking something, you're buying it as what's called a primary residence. And as a result, the lender likes that because they say, hey, I'm looking at your credit, your income, and your debt. And I'm saying, oh, yeah, you can afford this property and you're going to be the one paying the mortgage. So they don't make you put as much down and they're going to give you a better interest rate. But if you go buy an investment property and you're not going to move into it, then you end up in a situation where they're looking at your credit, your debt, your income, but you're not the one that's going to be paying the mortgage. So it's seen as more risk. So they charge you more in a down payment and interest rate. So what does that look like? When you go to buy your first home as a primary residence, you can put as little as 3% down. If anyone here is a veteran, you may qualify for 0%, and you should freaking use it if it makes sense, because that's a lovely benefit for serving our country. 20% is what's required if you're going to buy a property and not move into it. That's the minimum. So why? Please answer. Somebody, not really, but you're living in Denver and you tell me, hey, I am renting right now, but I'm going to go buy a property in Texas. Okay, so time out. So you're going to keep paying rent here in Denver and go put 20% down on a property in Texas when you could put 3% down, buy a primary residence in Denver, save up that 3% again if you've got the 20%, and then go buy your place in Texas. But please stop paying rent. That was the number one rule. It's technically number 4, but one of the biggest rules tonight. The other thing is the interest rate. I'm sure that all of you have heard that in the last year and a half, interest rates have been high. So investors have gotten very sensitive to this. When you buy a property as a primary home, you're going to get the lowest interest rate that you possibly can. If you're going to buy it as an investment property, they're going to charge you 0.75 to 1.5% more to pick up that investment property. Because same thing, right? They want more money down and they want to charge you a higher interest rate because you're not the one paying the mortgage. So you get all of the benefits of owning an investment property when you house hack. The biggest disadvantage, and it's the reason that it's not for some people, is because you lose some privacy, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. Does anyone have questions before we jump into the steps of house hacking? Sweet. Let's do it. So the steps. First, you're going to build your team. We're going to go through all of these too, so don't worry. You're going to build your team. You're going to get some money figured out. You're going to develop your strategy. You'll then go find a house. You'll purchase that house. You're going to get tenants in there, and then you'll rinse and repeat, hopefully just a year after, but maybe it'll be 2. So number 1, build your team. Hand is raised. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I have one quick question. Look this up after the call, but just wanted to touch base on an earlier point with regards to house hacking versus owning. You sort of pointed out like your particular strategy when it comes to the advantages of what you prefer to do is to buy property that needs work to be done, and you sort of take advantage of since it's a property that almost like a business expense, you have the ability to write off depreciation and operating expenses, so you get like the bang for your buck with you get the improvement, and you're getting since you're using it as a write-off for the percentage of the people you rent it to, you're able to write that off. But just like at a high level, when you say write that off percentage wise, what just at a high level, is that it's like getting like 25% of the discount of what you're putting back, or is it like just like at a high level, what is like a write-off?
Yeah, good question. So the way that my accountant does it, and you'll have to talk to a CPA, I can't give tax advice, yada, 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 yada. The way that my accountant does this is he does it as a percentage. So if I'm renting out a 2,000 square foot home, I'm renting out 1,000 square feet of it, right? So 50% of the property, and I spend 50K on remodels, I'm going to be able to write off roughly 50% of that, because I'm renting out 50% of the house. Now, there's a huge asterisk there, which is it depends on what you did and what you replaced with what material. I won't get too
Okay.
far into that. But as an example, if you're you're writing off the fact that you replaced carpet with LVP, luxury vinyl plank, which lasts, 25 to 30 years rather than just carpet, you won't actually
Uh-huh.
get as much of a benefit in year one because they're going to depreciate it over a longer period of time rather than if you just put
Mhm.
carpet back, they're going to give you more kind of depreciation on that over a 5-year period because carpet only lasts 5 years kind of thing. So it will
Ah,
matter a little bit in addition to just how much of the property you're renting out.
okay. Thanks for explaining.
Yeah, no, that was a really good question. Thanks for asking. I'm not a CPA. Okay. All right. Moving into build your team. So, who the heck do you need on your team? Good news, guys. If you just find a badass real estate agent that understands house hacking, they're going to make the rest of this process real easy for you. So, just find a good agent and they'll do the rest of them. And when I say find a real estate agent that understands house hacking, I mean every word in that sentence. Not just find a good real estate agent, but that understands house hacking. It is a niche. So there are all sorts of different codes, ordinances, rules, etc., that an agent needs to understand for the purposes that you're intending to use the property. Anybody can go sell a house, but particularly when you're buying an investment in something that you want to hold on to, you want to make sure that you do it right from the jump. So, how do we find good real estate agents? If you're in Denver, I know one. If you're anywhere else in the country, I also probably know one I can connect you with. So, I'll give you my phone number and email at the end. I have a really good network of people across the country. There's no like benefit necessarily of connecting you with them other than I know that they're going to take great care of you. And then hopefully if you know an awesome person in Denver, you'll say, "Oh yeah, this girl, I went to one of her classes, you should call her." Great. Okay, so you need a real estate agent. The second one is you need a lender. I'm going to assume no one here has buckets of money underneath of their mattress. And so you're going to need a loan. Super important again that the lender understands what it is that you're trying to do, because it's not the first purchase that you make that's tricky on the lending side. It's when you go to make the jump from your first house hack into your second house hack that it starts to get really messy. So you need a lender that understands what it is that you're doing so that they can help you set your leases and such up so that you don't make it so you don't qualify for your next one. The third one is an insurance broker. So there is a difference between an insurance agent and an insurance broker. An insurance agent, pro tip, just works for one company, like Progressive, Geico, etc. So that's the only company when you call them that they're going to be able to give you pricing from. When you call an insurance broker, they'll shop across anywhere from 15 to 30 different carriers to find who is giving you the best rate at that time with the best coverage. So, pro tip for anybody that owns a car, is renting right now, owns a house, whatever, highly recommend that you work with an insurance broker rather than an insurance agent. Asterisk to that is if you've been with the same company for the last 10 years, you probably won't find better coverage. But guess what? You should look anyways, because then you know. Okay. The next people that you need, one is an inspector. So important. You've got to make sure the house isn't falling over, that there's no major issues. Whatever issues there are, you want to make sure that you know about them, you understand the financial consequences. Hopefully your agent is a badass negotiator and gets most of that covered for you. But you really need to understand the condition of the property, because guess what? You're no longer a renter. And so when shit breaks, you're the one that has to fix it. So you want to make sure you know what's coming up, when that's going to happen roughly, and make sure you have funds set aside accordingly. The next is a team of contractors. As I just said, shit's going to break. You need people to fix it. Duh. The next one is an attorney and a CPA. So the attorney is going to help you with your lease agreement. The CPA is going to help you with your taxes. So important with these two, that they understand real estate investing specifically, There are so many accountants, there are so many attorneys, and they'll do general type of work. You'll call them and they'll say, oh yeah, we help people with their taxes for investment properties. The best question that you can ask these people to make sure that they know what the heck they're doing is, do you own investment properties? Because if they do, guess what? They're going to really know and understand the rules because they want all of the benefits, right? So do you own real estate investments? Do you own residential real estate? Have you had properties before? Then they will really understand the tax code. General people aren't going to help you a whole lot here. I just can't express this enough. These are your professional services people. They're the ones that are going to get you out of bad situations. So make sure you hire good ones. Okay, the next thing you got to figure out is the monies. Again, assuming you guys don't have money underneath of your mattress, you're going to go get a loan. So the way that that happens is you go get pre-approved through that lender that you found. By the way, there is a strong connection between realtors and lenders. To make sure you have the most seamless process possible, again, find your agent and they will have great lenders for you to talk to and shop around with that'll make sure that it goes well. So once you get that pre-approval from the lender, this is going to help you determine what you can buy. So the number of units, the purchase price involved, etc. You just want to make sure you tell the lender that you intend to occupy it as a primary, because then you'll get a lower interest rate and lower down payment. And you might also want to communicate with them that you intend to buy as aggressively as possible. All right, so that's the monies. Then you got to come up with a plan. So we talked about the why earlier, right? Which is the first thing on here. What's your end goal? So you've got your team assembled, you've figured out the financing. So now you know a little bit more of what you actually qualify to buy. So that's probably going to be useful information for you when you're starting to think about how many rentals you want and what those might look like, because you'll now better understand the financial side of it. So do you want passive income, retirement, no living expense, etc.? Figure that out. And then figure out, okay, where am I going to buy? One of the most common questions I get from so many different people is, are you going to buy outside of Colorado? There's this fun word all over the investment sector, which is diversify, right? We've all heard it, diversify, diversify, diversify. I get it. And in theory, it will help mitigate your risk because you have things in different areas. So if one goes bad in one area, the other area hopefully is still doing well. For me personally, I am not going to invest outside of Colorado. I might invest in different markets within Colorado, but one of my biggest things, as I mentioned, is to be able to stop working as soon as humanly possible. And what I don't want to be doing is managing 5 property managers. Because if I have a property in Colorado and one in Florida, never mind, I'd never buy in Florida. Also Ohio, Kansas, California, whatever. And I'm going to hire property managers for those people because I don't live there. Now, all of a sudden, I'm managing 3 or 4 property managers. Like, it just all doesn't work with my personal strategy, but it might work with yours. So figure out where you're going to buy. Maybe for you, it's you want to have a primary, you want to have one other rental wherever it is that you're living. And then maybe you want to get a little creative. Maybe there's friends and family that you can help out. Maybe your mom's getting older and you want to make sure that she has a good house. And so you set up a financial arrangement that works for both of you, right? Or you're doing the same thing with a niece, a nephew, a daughter, etc. So there are other ways that you can use this to help your family too. This strategy should also help you determine what you will buy, aka the number of units, how many properties you need, the amount of work needed. Like, is it totally move-in ready? Or do you want something that you actually got to put some sweat equity into? And then it will help you determine when you'll buy, because you'll see really quickly, like, oh yeah, I want to buy $1 million duplex and move into it. Oh, but even as a primary, I'm going to have to put, well, they just changed it in November. Now it's 5% down. It used to be 15. So let me just erase that right out of my mouth. Let's use a different analogy. Let's say you're going to buy an investment property and not move into it, and you got to put 20% down, and it's a $500,000 home, and you quickly realize, oh my gosh, that's $100,000. So after my first one, I'm going to need to save for 2 years to be able to buy that one, or 3 years, or 4 years, right? So that'll kind of hash out your whole plan, and your agent and your lender will help you with this. So if you can kind of figure out the end goals and some of these other points that are important to you, you'll be able to get a really good strategy together. The fourth is to find a property. So couple different scenarios that can happen with house hacks. And the number one kind of pushback I get from people on house hacking is that they will lose privacy. So there's a couple different arrangements that help with this a ton. And just so you guys know, a traditional home where you buy a house and you rent out all the bedrooms, or a townhome or a condo, you can literally house hack all of it. That all works just fine. But if you've got privacy concerns, maybe you want to consider what's called an ADU. ADU stands for accessory dwelling unit. So it is an extra kind of unit on the property outside of the primary. So a few different ways that this can look. And I'm going to speak to Denver a little bit here. Sorry, guys, I'm not in all of your markets, but it should still give you a good idea. So looking at this picture, the top left is a detached ADU. So think like carriage house or tiny home in the backyard, right? You've got your main structure and then you've got a detached ADU somewhere else. The second one is an attached ADU. So there's a builder right now, Lennar, who's building these next gen homes, is what they're calling them, next generation. It's super smart. They're building these behemoth 5,000 square foot houses. And one side of the house is like roughly 4,000 square feet. And then there's a door that you can close. It's an exterior door on the inside that you can lock and close, right? Just like you would a garage door, that goes to a 1,000 square foot lock off or a mother-in-law suite. And that side, right, has a bedroom, a bathroom, a living room, a kitchen, laundry, and its own garage. So they're building these homes with the understanding that a lot of people are starting to move in together as boomers are aging, et cetera. So that's kind of what an attached ADU would look like. Another one is an above garage ADU. This is so common in Denver. You'll have a primary structure, and then in the back, you've got this detached garage that's alley facing, and it's got a little apartment above it. The next one is a basement ADU. This is probably the most common thing in Denver that I sell to my house hackers, which is where you've got a single family home and it has a basement, but we're either able to buy it with a separate entrance to the basement, or you're able to basically make it private. Like there's a door that you can close and the exterior door just goes right down to the basement. And that basement typically in Denver will have 2 or 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen, a living room, and maybe you can configure it to have its own laundry. So that's a very common one in Denver. Another one is a converted garage ADU. I'll show you an example of that one later. One of my clients did that. And then last but not least is an upper floor ADU. So it's the exact same thing as the basement ADU, just in reverse, right? So you've got the main house, and then rather than having a basement, it's got an extra little loft above it with its own stairwell kind of thing. Okay, so those are just a few of the types. So now it's time to purchase a property. I'm not going to go through any of these steps because this is what I cover in my Home Buying 101 class. So if all of these words look like gibberish to you, you should probably come to that class. It will help. So to purchase the property, you write an offer. Hopefully you negotiate and get under contract. You drop off some earnest money. You have an inspection to make sure it's not falling over. There's some title work involved. You get insurance on that thing. You have an appraisal done to make sure you're not overpaying. You get your loan finally, and then you show up to closing and sign your life away. Just like that. Look, you don't even have to come to the Home Buying 101 class. I just gave it to you in 5 seconds. No, just kidding. Okay, so you purchase the property, you close. The next step is you've got to get tenants in there. This is usually where I have the most number of questions from my house hackers. So in order to get tenants, there's a couple things you need to figure out. And pro tip, a lot of this you should figure out when you're doing showings. And that's why it's so important that you have an agent that understands house hacking, because this rent analysis that I am saying, which is you determining how much you're going to rent by the room or by the unit, is something that I can do offhand in the property. While we're there, you're going to say, what can I rent that bedroom for? $850. What can I rent this basement for? $1250. Like I can just rattle that stuff off to you so you can see if the monthly payment makes sense for you. But if you had the unfortunate mistake of not buying with me, I can still do a rent analysis for you. So I basically just need the address of the property and what it is that you're renting or intending to rent, and I can help you come up with how much you should be charging. And that's just going to be straight up rent, right? So what you'll also need to figure out is, are you including utilities? If so, which ones? Are you going to allow pets? If so, are you going to charge for pets? What else is included? Is there parking, or is it $100 a month for parking? So you need to figure out what it is that you're charging and what is included in that. You're also going to take pictures of the property. So a lot of times on my house hacks, what we're able to do is, if the listing photos are good, I will actually write into the contract that the seller allows my buyer to use their professional photography. And in doing so, my client closes and they're immediately able to get the listing up and start interviewing tenants so that they can get income in. If the photos were not good, there's a bunch of different companies that you can hire. The one in Denver I like is called Virtuence. It's like $200 or $300 and you have really high quality professional photos. You can also get a floor plan done, which is really helpful when you're looking to rent out bedrooms. So you got your price, you got your photos. Now you need to create your listing. So there's also going to be a property description. Thanks to AI, this has gotten much easier. If you have not used ChatGPT or any other AI, I am sorry. If you ever have to write anything, it's so helpful. All you need to do is list out a bunch of bullet points of what the things are that you want to talk about in that little listing that you're putting up there, what's included, what's not, what you love about the place, etc. And just hit describe, right? And it will literally shoot back a beautifully written property description for you that you can just throw into your listing. Where do I list my properties? That's a really common question I get. So it depends on if you're renting out rooms or if you're renting a whole unit. And what I mean by that is, if you've got a house and you're just renting out the other 2 bedrooms and there's no privacy, that means you're renting by the room, right? You guys are going to be roommates. If you've got an ADU or a lock-off basement or something of that nature, you're renting out a unit. And different sites will only allow you to post units, and then some sites allow you to post room rentals. So Zillow does not allow you to post room rentals. It has to be a whole unit. And Zillow is where I find the best renters, unfortunately. So just know that up front. Other places I post, if it's the whole unit, Facebook, HotPads, Craigslist, et cetera, et cetera. If I'm renting by the room, my favorite place to post typically is Facebook groups, particularly travel nurses. I find that midterm furnished rentals are performing the best right now. So you throw a bed, a nightstand, and a few other decorations in there, a couple $100, and you're able to charge a lot more for shorter leases, and you're not stuck with people that you don't like for a year. You'll find out if you like them and they'll be gone within 3 to 6 months. So it's great. So Facebook groups is the big one for me for renting by the room. Also your friends. But the huge asterisks I have for you guys, please learn from so many of my clients' mistakes and don't make it yourself. When you've got a friend or an adult family member that you're going to rent to, please, I beg you, make sure that you do 3 and 4 on this slide. So 3 is screen your applicants. I don't care if they're family or friends. You absolutely need to have them fill out an application. The site that I use is apartments.com. They have a lovely system where you can create an application link. You can send it to a potential tenant. The tenant pays $40 on that link, puts in all their info, and it emails you a credit and background check, as well as their last few places they've lived, references, etc. So it's pretty extensive. Zillow also has this built in. I just don't think it's quite as thorough or as formative as the apartments.com. So again, friends or family, please still have them do a background check. Not a background check, excuse me, a credit check. The other thing that I do that's a little creative is, if I'm going to be living with you and you're going to have a pet, I need to make sure that that pet is not a psychopath. So I ask tenants after I've done my initial screening, if they're going to come look at the property, to bring their pet with them. Bring your pet with you. You bring your dog. Let's let it off leash while we're walking around. And I'm going to see really quickly if that's a dog that I'm going to be able to tolerate or not. Okay, so that's the screening applicants part. The next one is the tenant's going to move in, and this is where you would have wanted to have your attorney lined up in advance so that you can actually get a lease signed right away. So you're going to sign a lease, you're going to take a security deposit. If you're allowing pets, you might also take a refundable pet deposit. And then you're going to fill out a move-in checklist. Super, super important on House Hacks that you do this each time a tenant moves in. The reason for that is if you are renting out a bedroom to somebody and you're all sharing a living space, each time you do a move-in checklist, it's like a snapshot of the property at that point in time. If you then have another tenant that moves in and you're going through to go do the move-in checklist, you might notice some damage. Ooh, I didn't see that before. Now you know which tenant is responsible for it, right? And this is about the only form that you're going to have to hold people accountable. So the move-in checklist is really important. Okay, so let's say you've got your tenants. Now all you got to do is do it again, right? That was easy peasy, just rinse and repeat. So how does that work? You promise the lender at closing that you're going to live there for 1 year, that you intend to live there for 1 year. So you're going to buy it, move into it, do this whole thing, and hopefully a year later you're ready to buy again. If not, if it's longer than that, that's fine. But here's the key. The intention of this is you basically acquiring rentals, only having to put 3 and 5% down rather than buying rentals and putting 20% down each time, right? Because I can buy 4 rentals with 5% down at the same or much faster rate than I could just buying 20% down property. So you're able to acquire a lot faster. So what you want to do is not sell. So you buy your first one, you rent it out. When you're ready to go buy your second one, you buy the second one and then you rent out the first one. Don't offload it. You want to go acquire a couple of rentals, I'd say at least 2 or 3, and then you can start to play the tax game. Then you can start to look at, does it make sense for me to do a cost segregation study or to do a 1031 exchange or to do all of these other things? But you don't need to worry about any of that until you've got a couple of them. Questions before I show you guys some fun examples of this? That woman right there, if you don't know, is not Mia Hamm. It is Brandi Chastain. This was a monumental moment in my upbringing. Okay, so success stories. So the first person I'm going to talk to you about is a buddy of mine named Rylan. In 2019, he went to purchase his first home. He used an FHA loan, so he put 3.5% down. And he purchased a property for $462,000. It was a pretty standard single-family home, but it had an amazing basement with a lock-off. So upstairs was 2-bed, 1-bath, kitchen, living room, laundry. Same thing in the basement. And actually, the basement was even nicer than the upstairs. So 2-bed, 1-bath, living, kitchen, a separate laundry, and then the backyard was shared. So his payment on that thing was $2,900 a month, all in. He rented the basement at that time for $1,800 a month. And then he and his partner lived upstairs and he charged her $500 a month. He is a much nicer partner than I am. So his portion was only $600 per month. Exactly 1 year later, literally the same closing date, because he promised that he'd live there for 1 year. So he did. April 22nd, every year he buys a new one. Exactly 1 year later, in 2020, he bought his second home, which is $417,000. This time he put 5% down. Interest rates were better, if you recall, during COVID. So his payment was only $2,400 a month. When he moved into the second property, this is what's crazy, he was able to rent out the first one. And he basically rented out the basement and rented out the top and charged $2,000 for each. So he was bringing in $4,000 a month on that first property, which after his payment meant that he was making $1,100 a month on a property that he only put 3.5% down on. So now in his new house, his payment's $2,400 a month. He's renting the basement out over here for $1,000, still charging his girlfriend $500. So his portion over here was $900 in the new house that he should have paid, but he was making $1,100 over here. So what ended up just happening is he eliminated his living expense, and he had two houses, and he did it in a year. So in 13 months, he went from paying $1,100 a month in rent, because that's how much I charged him to rent a bedroom, $1,100 per month in rent, to making $200 per month, paying no mortgage, no rent, no living expense. His total down payments to do that was only $36,000 between the two. And at that point, he had $900,000 in appreciating assets that other people were going to pay off for him, and in theory are going to be worth double in 30 years. So now all this money he's saving on his living expenses, he was then able to just stock aside. He now is up to 4 properties. He's just slaying. So it's good stuff. Okay, the second example is my buddy Allison. In the top right corner, I told you that one of my clients did a converted garage ADU. And in that top right corner, the top left of that photo, you can kind of see the track from the garage door. So this was the studio apartment that she put into her garage when she bought her property. So a little bit about Allison's story. That's us backpacking in the wilderness as well. So in 2018, she bought a single family home for $287,000. Every time I see that number, I'm like pissed, because we're so far away from that in Denver anymore. I just can't believe it. She put 5% down. Her payment was $1,700 a month, and she basically got a 3-bed, 1-bath home with an attached 1-car garage. She converted that garage into a private unit. It cost her about $15K to build all of that out, put in heat, the bathroom, sink, kitchenette, etc. She rents that garage for $1,100 a month. In the primary structure, her partner pays all the utilities, so she's paying $600 a month to live there. She previously paid $600 a month to rent a tiny little basement bedroom. She has since purchased another rental in Florida and is looking for another house in Colorado. All right, I've got 2 more for you. One is my boy Brandon. I am so freaking proud of this man. It's unbelievable. He's under contract on his second one right now. So last year in January, he paid $451,000 for a townhome, and you can house hack townhomes. He put 3% down. Rates were higher at this point, so his payment was $3,100 a month, including his HOA. This freaking townhome is a 6-bed, 4-bath, 2-kitchen townhome. It is unlike any other townhome I've ever seen. And he rents out 4 of the bedrooms and 2 of the garage spots, because there's a detached 2-car garage, and he brings in $3,600 a month. So he's living for free in a 2-bed, 1-bath apartment in the basement with a kitchen, and making, right, an extra $500 a month. It's absolutely insane. And he previously paid $1,750 a month in rent for an apartment. So because he was able to do that for a whole year, he was saving like $1,200 a month. He quickly saved up his down payment for the next one. So he's currently under contract on a single family home with an ADU down in Colorado Springs at 625, and it will perform very well for him. All right, last but not least is yours truly. That's me chugging a bottle of champagne in front of the first house I bought, because it was terrifying. So the first property I purchased was in 2017. I paid $460. I put 0% down, not because I am a veteran, unfortunately, but because I represented myself. So I was a real estate agent at the time, so I represented myself on the deal. So I applied my entire 2.8% commission to my down payment and beat the shit out of the seller at inspection. So I got a bunch in credits, and I actually got a check at closing on my first property. Put $0 down. It was insane. So my payment was $2,900 a month. I rented out one of the bedrooms for $1,200 a month to a friend, and then I rented out the other bedroom to my now wife for $850 a month, making my portion $850 a month, which I was super happy with, because I was paying $750 a month in rent before and living with 3 other people. That home 6 years later is now worth $750,000 thanks to the COVID boom. So I went from 460 to 750 and I put 0% down. Crazy. So 300K in equity roughly on that one with zero money in it. I refinanced that property once 2020 came around and rates got better. So I got my payment down from $2,900 a month to $2,300 a month. I rent that house out for $3,450 a month. So I'm bringing in roughly $1,150 a month on that guy. I then sold my company, my construction business, as I told you about, and I used all that money to buy a duplex that needed a lot of work. So I paid $855 for a 4,300 square foot duplex. It is 5-bed, 5 full bath. The payment on it is $3,600 a month. I'm able to rent out unit 1 for $2,500 a month. We were living in unit 2, and our portion should have been $1,100 a month. But here's the crazy thing. My wife and I are on a year-long trip right now, and we're renting out our fully furnished side of the duplex for $4,000 a month. So literally we're bringing in $6,500 a month. Our payment is roughly 35. So we're bringing in 3K a month off of this one property, which is funding all of our stays where we're at right now. But before I was basically living rent free, which is great. Then in 2022, I bought another duplex. So a 6-bed, 4-bath duplex. The payment is $4,000 a month. I rent both sides for $2,500, bringing in roughly like $1,000 a month net on that one. So the important thing is I'm now living for free, actually making 3K, actually 4K, nope, 5K per month passively, and have 2.75 in assets being paid for by other people. And the crazy thing is, it wasn't that hard to do. It was just a lot of moving around. All right, well, that was the class. There's all of my info. If you guys need agents, wherever you're at, if you want to see a total financial breakdown, I'm like one of the most open people you'll meet, like literally dollar per dollar on all of my rentals. On my website there, I have a blog written that says Third Time's a Charm, and it breaks everything down with photos. Otherwise, there's my email, cell phone, Instagram. We put out a ton of good info, so it's helpful no matter where you are in the country. Otherwise, what questions do you have?